Yes, all right. Oh, excuse me. All right, so here we are. All right, so we're just putting up another video right quick. All right, and in this video, what I'm going to touch on is how these so-called Afro-Caribbeans be trying to take credit for our grassroots movements here in the USA. All right, they'll try to take the credit for it by trying to say that Garvey is the foundation for all of the so-called Black conscious movements that came after Garvey and the UNIA. All right, and that's just simply not true. All right, and we're going to show and prove. All right, so that's what this video is about. And I'm also going to touch on Africans who like to gaslight and be intellectually dishonest when speaking on ADOS. All right, so I'm going to throw that into the mix too. So this is going to be like part 3 of the other 2 videos, but it's going to be mostly some new information. All right, touching on these so-called Afro-Caribbeans trying to take the credit for people like Malcolm, right? For all those that came after Garvey, people like Malcolm, the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Master Fard Muhammad, Prophet Noble Drew Ali, and others, right? So the first thing is this. All right, so this is the first thing that I'm going to touch on, which is probably the most important. All right, and I'm also going to show my sources. So when they try to say that it's Garvey that laid the foundation down for all of the other conscious groups that came afterwards, all right, simply because Garvey is Jamaican, so he's from the Caribbean, so these Afro-Caribbeans will try to take credit for what we've done here. See, look, they're being disingenuous when they make that claim, simply because Garvey himself, and I'll show the proof, but Garvey himself is quoted as saying that he renounced his participation in local Jamaican politics in the year 1914, mind you, and created the UNIA in Jamaica and proposed an industrial farm and institute in Jamaica based on the Tuskegee University and Institute in the United States of America, in which we know that Booker T. Washington was the head. All right, this is what Garvey himself said, that the UNIA was based on something that was already in existence in the USA 30 years prior. All right, the Tuskegee Institute was founded in 1881. The UNIA wasn't founded until 1914, 30 years prior. So Garvey himself is saying that I based my demo on something that was already established. So we made Garvey. Garvey didn't make us. You see? And let's pull up Tuskegee Institute. Let's pull it up. Let's pull it up. All right. So well, before I pull it up, this right here is the source of what I'm going to speak about today relative to Garvey. All right. The name of this work is the Marcus Garvey and Universal Negro Improvement Association Papers, Volume 1, by author Robert A. Hill. All right. You can look it up. All right. Here's a bigger picture of the cover. Marcus Garvey and the Universal Negro Improvement Association Papers, Robert A. Hill, Volume 1, and you can just go all into it. It gets deep. All right, and it says that this work is supported by the University of California, Los Angeles, and supported by the National Endowment for the Humanities, the National Historical Publications and Records Commission. All right, so this just isn't some fly-by-night crap. This is a scholarly work by an individual that's qualified, Robert A. Hill. All right, so this is peer-reviewed and whatnot. All right, you better believe it. All right, if it's supported by the university, if it's sponsored by the University of California, Los Angeles, this is a peer-reviewed work. All right, this ain't no pseudo scholarship. All right, but let me show you the Tuskegee Institute. All right. So as you can see here, the Tuskegee Institute, let me scroll down. As you can see right here, was founded in 1881. All right. So this is 30 years before Garvey came in 1914 with the UNIA. All right. Founded by someone named Lewis Adams. See? Lewis Adams, an African-American former slave in Macon County, Alabama, who is best remembered for his work in helping found the school in 1881 in Tuskegee, Alabama, which grew to become the normal school that with its first principal, Booker T. Washington, grew to become, right? All right, so this is a foundational so-called Black American. This ain't nobody from the Caribbean, this ain't nobody from Africa, this is our people. All right. And if you read the rest of this, you'll see that Lewis Adams was at the forefront of our people practicing what's called agenda-based voting. All right, they helped a particular individual get elected, and thus in return, he voted that our people would have funding for what will become the Tuskegee Institute. All right, so let's stop the share. Let me scroll up first. All right, Tuskegee University, you can easily find this on Wikipedia. All right. All right, so Garvey, again, is saying what led to him creating the UNIA. All right, and it's Booker T. Washington and the Tuskegee Institute founded by Lewis Adams. All right. Another thing is that Garvey himself explained why he came to the USA in 1960. And see, this is the stuff that a lot of these pseudo scholars from the Caribbean and from Africa, when they get on the internet, this is the stuff that they're not telling you. And it's either because A, they don't know, or because B, they want to be intellectually dishonest and they want to try to finesse you mentally. All right, but Garvey himself said that his failure to make headway in Jamaica is what impelled him to come to the United States in 1960, which was 2 years after the UNIA was founded. And he said that his coming to the USA was attributed to the absence of a clear-cut racial consciousness in Jamaica. He said that. He said he came to the USA because of a clear-cut racial consciousness in Jamaica. So essentially what he's saying is that these individuals here ain't for the cause. I'm going to immigrate to the USA and get around some people that's for the cause. All right, he goes on to say that the American Negroes, this is Garvey talking, he goes on to say that the American Negroes are the best organized and the most conscious of all the Negroes in the world. And he says that they have become so because of their peculiar position. They live in very close contact with organized racial prejudice. And this very prejudice forces them to a rare consciousness that they otherwise would not have, or that they would not have otherwise. All right, so this is Garvey saying that these guys under pressure stood up and became these revolutionaries that I want to associate myself with and be around. All right. And I'm going to show you the source of the work. Let's see. This is the source that I'm drawing from. All right, again. All right, so the name of this work is DeMarcus Garvey and Universal Negro Improvement Association, Volume 1 by Robert A. Hill. All right. Let's come over here. All right. This is the work right here that I'm taking this out of. All right. This ain't no pseudo scholarship. This ain't no fly-by-night individual. All right. This is a peer-reviewed work recognized by the University of California, Cal, the Marcus Garvey and Universal Negro Improvement Association papers, Robert A. Hill, Volume 1. Supported by the National Endowment for the Humanities, the National Historical Publications and Records Commission, sponsored by the University of California, Los Angeles. I don't even need to say no. All right. All right. So this is where this information is coming from. All right. And this information is from the forward. All right. So this is prior to the first chapter where it's just, so this is in this section here, illustrations, acknowledgements, general introduction, the papers, editorial principles and practices. All right. So what I'm speaking on starts right here, general introduction, the papers and editorial practices. All right. So this is where you want to look for the information that I'm speaking on right now. All right. And this work is just so crazy. Like, just look at some of the chapters. This work is crazy. All right. So we're going to scroll back up and we're going to stop the share. All right. So hopefully we're clear on who Garvey based his organization that he called the UNIA on. It's based on ADOS. So these Afro-Caribbeans, like these Haitians and these Jamaicans, who want to try to steal our culture or try to find a way to tether themselves to us, listen, the gig is up. The gig is up. All right. We're going to do the research and we're going to see what's what. We're going to see who's who and what's what. And y'all just keep coming up short. And either you're outright lying or you're just not qualified to speak on these things. All right. And to the whole Pan-African thing, because I hear a lot of people touch on Pan-Africanism. It's these Pan-Africanists, they're the reason that Africans are getting comfortable. And Garvey was a Pan-Africanist, because I keep hearing that. All right, so let me shed some light on that. The Back to Africa movement is see, that was the thing long before Garvey. All right, amongst our people. Garvey didn't start that. All right, it's so many people that was pushing that before Garvey came along. All right, so we need to be clear on that. And the UNIA originally wasn't a Back to Africa movement until the Red Summer of 1919. All right, 3 to 4 years after Garvey immigrated to the USA, and maybe 6 years, 5 to 6 years before, after the UNIA was founded. All right, and the Red Summer situation was, this was a period from late winter 1919, late winter as in January, February, March, to the early autumn of 1919, which the early autumn would probably be the end of September. All right, it wasn't until the Red Summer when Garvey adopted the idea of Africans for Africans. All right, and that was in the year 1920 or 1921 when he adopted that idea or that ideology, but it wasn't until the Red Summer of 1919. And I'm going to show you what the Red Summer is or was. All right, so let's see. so that we're clear. All right, so here it is. Here you can see red summer. All right, so red summer is a period from late winter through early autumn of 1919, during which white supremacist terrorism and racial riots took place in more than 36 cities across the United States, as well as in one rural county in Arkansas. The term Red Summer was coined by civil rights activist and author James Weldon Johnson, who had been employed as a field secretary by the NAACP since 1916. All right. So basically what Red Summer was just a series of riots all across the country in 1919. All right. And obviously this was our people standing up to what's called white supremacy. So it wasn't until this period when Garvey said, hey, you know what? Maybe we should have our people entertain the idea of going back to Africa, which is problematic because A, we built this country. B, you had those of our people who weren't bought from the other side, who was always here prior to colonization and have an ancestry here, but also was a slave. See, so yes, you had slaves bought from the other side, but you had those as a slave who was already here. So either way, we're ADOS, no matter which way you slice it. All right. Now, back to my point when I said that the idea of going back to Africa predates Garvey. All right, it predates the Red Summer, obviously, because the Red Summer is where Garvey got the idea. Well, rather, it's because of the Red Summer. But the idea of going back to Africa is something that this East African Christian minister named Prince U. Kabariga had. He had the idea. And he had it a whole year before Garvey, maybe 2 years. All right. In 1918, he was running around pushing this, right? And nothing ever came of it. All right. And prior to Garvey, like 100 years before Garvey, there was this organization called the American Colonization Society. All right. And this was something, I want to say founded in 1821 by somebody named Robert Finley. All right. And let me see if I can pull it up and screen share it for you guys so you guys can see that I'm not just saying a bunch of anything. I'm not capping, as they say, right? All right. So here it is, the American Colonization Society, as you can see. All right. All right. Originally known as a Society for the Colonization of Free People of Color, blah, 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 blah. Founded in 1816 by Robert Finley to encourage and support the migration of free African Americans to the continent of Africa. All right, here's his picture. All right, so this is like 100 years before Garvey. All right. All right. This is like 100 years before Garvey. So this idea didn't begin with Garvey. All right. So this is the second person that had the idea before Garvey. And the American Colonization Society actually didn't have our people's best interests at heart. You know, these were ones that had the idea of, all right, well, we use these people, we worked them half to death. You know, we got up hundreds of years of free labor. Now let's send them somewhere else so we don't have to to deal with the problem of repairing the damage that we've done to these people, all right? But that's a whole another conversation. I won't spend time on that as of right now, but maybe some other time we'll get into what this organization is all about, all right? But this was 100 years before Garvey, all right? Back to Africa movement. All right, now let's get into this other individual who had the idea before Garvey as well. All right, now here's Paul Coffey. All right, but before I touch on it, so during the American Revolutionary War, all right, which during the American Revolutionary War, you had two sides. You had loyalists, those who were loyal to the English crown, and then you had patriots, those who was loyal to those in the colonies that wanted to break away from England. Due to what? Due to the whole intolerable acts. You had stuff going on like Shays Rebellion. You had the Boston Tea Party. You had what was called the Articles of Association during that time, which was based on one of the things that I mentioned, or more than one. So it was a lot going on during that time. So this is before the United States of America existed. This is when the USA was the 13 colonies of England before they became the 13 original states, and then obviously expanding to more than 50. But when they were the colonies of Great Britain, they were subject to the English crown. All right. So when the American Revolutionary War broke out, you had loyalists, those loyal to England, and you had patriots. All right. Now, here's where this guy Paul Coffey comes in at. Now you had the loyalists, all right, those fighting on the side of Great Britain, say to all so-called blacks or ADOS that fights on the side of the English crown, that fights with the loyalists, will set you free, either in England or will establish another place for you, all right? So a lot of them was sent up to Canada. Obviously, they couldn't stay in the colonies, which was becoming the United States, which was its own country separate from England. So a lot of them went with the English when the English were expelled. Some of them went up to Canada. Obviously, Canada was a stronghold of the English crown. And Sierra Leone was actually established by loyalists, all right? And that's not really talked about. And this individual, Paul Coffey, was instrumental in that, all right? He was a so-called Black American, all right? He was ADOS. He was a ship captain, and he helped those so-called Black Americans who fought on the side of the British during the American Revolutionary War establish Sierra Leone. All right, but see, they don't tell you that part. And see, it be these same Africans coming here, and they love telling half truths, or they love just coming with narratives that try to paint us in a bad light, but they don't tell the whole divine truth. All right, so Sierra Leone was founded just like Liberia was founded. It was our people that went back to these places and founded these colonies, which became countries. You understand, which then was eventually, I guess, overran by West Africans from another place or those who were local there, who knows? But my point is that these guys don't be telling all of the history. All right, so again, Paul Coffey was a sea captain. He helped so-called free blacks who fought in the American Revolutionary War, established Sierra Leone, and essentially this was a back to Africa movement without getting into a whole lot, all right? And he was instrumental in it from after the American Revolutionary War all the way until like 1815, 1860. All right, so he was ending when the American Colonization Society was just starting up, all right? All right, this is Paul Coffey. As you can see, Paul Coffey. You can see he's a brother. See, he's an abolitionist, born free. So if they telling you he's born free, you know, he's a so-called black man. All right, look, his last trip right here, 1815, 1816. All right, now I told you that the American Colonization Society was founded um, in 1816. Let me see, where is it? Right here, founded in 1816, see? So by the time Paul Coffey was done, these guys was starting up. So I'm just saying that to say, if these guys was pushing the back to Africa idea 100 years before Garvey, and Paul Coffey was during the American Revolutionary War, probably about 50 years before him, that should tell you that Garvey was just pushing things that was kind of already in motion. And people just gave him credit for it, either because they're not well studied or because they take the things that are told to them on face value by those trying to take credit for their history, like in the case of these Afro-Caribbeans. All right. So again, the idea of going back to Africa didn't start with Garvey. All right, you got the American Colonization Society, like I just showed you with this guy, Robert Finley, in 1816. Then you got Paul Coffey from the late 1700s. And you even had this Baptist minister. I'm not sure if I brought him up, but his name was, he was actually an East African Christian minister named Prince U. Kabariga. And he had the back to Africa idea a year before Garvey, all right, in 1918. All right, and again, Garvey didn't get the idea, or rather, he didn't entertain the idea until after the Red Summer of 1919. So I'm saying that to say the UNIA didn't start out as a back to Africa movement. So a lot of people who are attacking Garvey and saying that Pan-Africanism is to blame for this whole back to Africa and we are one with Africans thing. I mean, it's true, but it's not always right and exact because Garvey didn't, because originally the UNIA wasn't a Pan-African movement, meaning Pan-African in the sense that we want to go back to Africa. So a back to Africa movement. All right, like that's something that it adopted later. All right, and yeah, so it's just a thing where we gotta have our antennas up, because you'll have these Afro-Caribbeans that want to try to pull the shade over our eyes. And that's just the real truth. All right, that's just the real truth of the matter. And again, it was Booker T. Washington and the Tuskegee Institute, which was the blueprint for Garvey. Garvey's failure to make headway in Jamaica because they wasn't about it. So he came here. This is all what Garvey is saying himself. And I already showed you the source. You see? All right. And there's so much more that I could get into, like the fact that 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 Garvey that Garvey's wife said that Garvey was a Mason through the influence of somebody named John E. Bruce and somebody named Dr. F.W. Elagore. And that the UNIA chapters operated quite freely within the ranks of so-called Black Greek fraternities, including Masonry. And that the UNIA was based on fraternal orders and Masonry. And it just gets into how they're governing constitution and just other things like their titles. So a lot of times you'll have those who belong to so-called Black Greek letter organizations and those who are Blue House Masons. They'll try to act like Garvey was something foreign and that's not the way, and we don't rock with that. But once upon a time, you know, the two groups was like interchangeable. You see? And see, that's something that needs to be touched on. We need to touch on the segregation that we practice amongst one another with these so-called Black Greek letter organizations and with this Masonry shit, because we practice segregation on each other. We gatekeep against each other. And this is how these immigrants were able to sneak in, these Afro-Caribbeans, these Africans. All right. And this is what needs to be addressed because we've been gang banging on each other. You see? All right. And all conscious groups aren't on that Pan-African shit. That's something else that needs to be touched on. All right, which I'll probably touch on those last two things that I just mentioned at a later time. I just wanted to share the information about how these Afro-Caribbeans are being intellectually dishonest when they give Garvey the credit for being our foundation and our root here as far as the so-called Black liberation is concerned. And lastly, I want to say this, because they'll try to say that since Malcolm's mother was from the Caribbean and was a Garveyite, then that Malcolm is one of them. But Malcolm himself said on numerous occasions that he was a brother. He was a Black man in America, so-called Black man in America. All right, he didn't identify with no Caribbean, nothing. And not only that, but Malcolm's teacher was the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who's from Sandersville, Georgia, the heart of the institution of slavery, the Deep South, all right, which is where my ancestors came from before they migrated to northern cities like Philadelphia and New York City, etc. All right, but not only that, too, we must remember during the time of Malcolm in the 60s, going all the way back to Garvey, like these immigrants were humble. They wasn't separating themselves saying, well, you Black, I'm Jamaican, or I'm Haitian. It wasn't none of that. When they came here during the time of Garvey, which they would come in very few numbers, and they wouldn't come in large numbers until the Immigration Act of 1964. But however, when they would come, they would be one with us because they know that the oppressor ain't caring about what flag or whatever Caribbean country, African country that you flying, you a nigga to us. So they knew that back then. So they was humbled. So during the time of Malcolm, even going all the way back to Garvey, it wasn't that distinction. But now, a lot of these immigrants are getting too comfortable, getting too cocky, and trying to rewrite history, trying to steal our lineage. And now it's problematic. So now we got to go in and say, hold on, Malcolm ain't claim you. Okay, his mother may have been whatever, but then who taught Malcolm? Who did Garvey model his whole thing after? So it still comes back to ADOS. Y'all can't run that shit on us. Y'all can't run that. All right, so with that being said, I'm going to yield the floor and we'll pick it up in another segment. All right, yeah.